Hello and welcome to lesson 6 on eyewitness testimony. So we're looking at the practical applications of memory, and one area the memory research has been particularly effective and has had many applications has been in the legal system. So specifically in regards to the police, gathering eyewitness testimony, questioning. And this section is going to look at some of those practical applications, the research behind it and so forth. So today you'll need to know about LOFTUS and Palmer. We're going to talk about the weapon effect and realism versus control. Here are your guide note questions as always. They will be the start for next lesson, so make sure you can answer all of those please. LOFTUS and Palmer then, this is the seminal study in eyewitness testimony research. Elizabeth LOFTUS took 45 students and she showed them several films of traffic accidents. These were relatively minor accidents. She then afterwards gave them a questionnaire about the videos, but it had one critical question designed to access or influence their memory. And that critical question was, how fast were the cars going when they? Now, for some of the participants, they received a different verb. So they would have had the verb hit. Others would have had the verb smashed. And others still bumped, contacted, and there was another as well. Well, what she found was interesting. Smashed produced the highest estimates of speed, a mean speed of 40.5 miles per hour. So they were asked to estimate how fast the cars were going when it hit, smashed, bumped. When they had the smash condition, 40.5 was the average speed. However, when they had contacted or bumped, it was much lower. So what we see here is that by questioning participants, we actually influence their memory of an event. Another key aspect to this was she asked a subsequent question based on the original videos. And in this question, she asked whether or not the participants saw broken glass. Those who were given the verb smashed, 16 of them said that they had seen broken glass, compared to only 7 of those who said that they had, those who had received the verb hit. So actually we see that not only is the memory manipulated by these misleading questions, in this case misleading information, this information endures long after the event and can affect subsequent analysis or subsequent memories of that event. So that's LOFTUS and Palmer. But I see you worrying a little bit that we've got this laboratory experiment. We're showing videos of traffic accidents and things like that. So what's eyewitness testimony like in a real environment? In the lab environment, it seems to be highly malleable, highly manipulative. We can manipulate it. YUILLE and Kutzel then in '86 carried out a study. They actually looked at a real event, and this was a real life shooting outside a Canadian gun shop. They found that the eyewitnesses had excellent recall, all 13 of them, and they were interviewed by the police later on. They were then re-interviewed 5 months onwards, so a big period of time in between the original event and the subsequent event. The police actually asked them 2 misleading questions based on the original event in the subsequent interview. And as it turned out, their recall remained high. So now we have 2 studies that potentially contradict each other. LOFTUS and Palmer, who say that under laboratory conditions, we have this highly manipulated memory system where participants are given a single question, it affects their memory, but in a real life situation, a case study in this case, we have a fairly robust memory. So another aspect to consider as well is the role of the conformity effect. So Gabbett looked at what happens when participants are able to share and discuss different events. Well, they showed that pairs of participants, different videos of the same event. So each participant basically viewed unique items. Pairs in one condition were encouraged to discuss it, and pairs in the other condition were not. 71% of the witnesses who had discussed the event went on to mistakenly recall items from their discussion, sometimes those witnessed by their pair. Now that becomes a huge problem, because that suggests that if you allow witnesses to actually confer, their accounts conform to a norm, an agreed set of events. So this is it shows how highly malleable our memory is, and sort of confirms what Loftus and Palmer were finding previously. This is the conformity effect then. This is also based, the synoptic link, on Bartlett. Remember, we looked at Bartlett's research that suggested that memory is reconstructed and not recorded. And this is very important because reconstructed memory means that you're not actually recalling the accurate event. You're actually constructing an event from fragments of memory. And every time you recall it, you change that memory slightly. BAUN et al. Then carried out another study, a much more ecologically valid study than Loftus and Palmer. BAUN gave participants fake advertising for Disneyland, and the advertising contained Bugs Bunny and Ariel. When the participants visited Disneyland later on, they reported shaking hands with these characters, both Ariel and Bugs. Now that's problematic because Bugs Bunny is actually a Warner Brothers property, not a Disney property. So BAUN showed that we could actually influence their memory of a real event, something that you'd think they would have quite a personal and substantial memory of, an episodic or autobiographical memory, by implanting this information. And this would actually, it has practical applications for advertising. As when we looked at Danaher's work on interference, brands shouldn't be too similar. In this case, you might want to embed in your advertising the best elements of a holiday, for example, and that might make individuals, when they're remembering the holiday later on, think that they actually experience those, especially if they're refreshed. So as you may have worked out already, there are a number of limitations to these studies in terms of their methodology. And one of the key limitations is the role of laboratory research versus natural experiments. In laboratories, we tend to find that memory is more malleable, that there are more inaccuracies, it is less accurate overall. But in real life studies, we tend to find quite a high level of accuracy. And this may be partly due to consequentiality. If you don't remember something in a laboratory context, there is no ultimate consequence. Most participants take part voluntarily in studies. In fact, all participants have to. But even in a field experiment, it's not necessarily going to be 100% consequential if you forget a fact. But in a legal case, it will. In fact, remembering someone's identity may be the difference between life and death. So actually, it's very important in real life to actually, there's a real consequence for failing to remember something that isn't present in laboratories, and that may motivate people differently. The ecological validity of such studies is questionable. In Loftus and Palmer's study, they watched videos on televisions in controlled environments, whereas in real life, stuff happens much more unpredictably. And this means that you can essentially have an expectation in a laboratory experiment that something's going to happen. The participants in Loftus's study would have known that they were going to watch something, and they may have even predicted what they were watching. Now, you might expect that to actually increase their ability to recall, but link that to the consequentiality or the mundaneness of the event. That could have influenced their recall dramatically. Whereas in a real life situation, even a mundane event that we do not expect to happen arouses us to some extent. It will surprise us, and we know that emotion has a strong link with memory. The hippocampus and the amygdala work together often to form long-term memories. Further evaluation then. A couple of extra ones to consider. Bakarian and Bowers, they found that participants resisted misleading information quite strongly if the order was preserved. So if, for example, the information, the questions, were asked in the same order and asked about the information in a chronological order, this increased the amount of information that they remembered, decreased the effect of misleading information. And there are a number of implications. This is the biggest part, and I need to see a paragraph on this in all of your essays, that the whole point of carrying out this research is it has huge implications for the justice system. specifically false convictions. If eyewitness testimony is unreliable, then this may cause a number of serious issues, because you may convict someone based on eyewitness testimony that is later unreliable. So that is eyewitness testimony research. As always, if you have any questions, you know where I am. Read a bit more on Loftus's study. Go beyond the specification. It's a very strong study. She carried out many subsequent pieces of research, and there is also a good TED Talk on this subject matter. Thank you very much for your time, as always, and I don't know how to shut this off now.